Hello everyone, and welcome back to the next episode of our tutorial series where we're setting up our 2D game. As we can see, last time we got our little character set up. He's got his sprite and we're able to move him around the scene, even if at the moment he's sliding everywhere at the moment. So we're going to get that fixed up today. We're going to set him up with some animations so that we can see which way he's going a little bit better. Last time as well, we imported all of our Fox sprites that we can see down at the bottom. So if we highlight those in the assets and we have a look at the sprite editor, we can see here are his idle sprites, facing forwards, backwards, right and left. And we've also got the walking sprites as well. So we've got 2 for when we're walking towards us and back, and we've got 4 sprites for each of the directions. And the next thing we're going to need to do then is turn these from being individual sprites into actual animations. And to do that, we're going to need a couple more windows in our editors. What we can do is we can come up to Window up at the top. From there, we can come down to Animation, and we're going to need both the Animation and the Animator in our windows. So we'll bring in Animation first. Again, it's going to come up in a separate window. We can just grab hold of that and we'll drag it down and pop it down here next to Console, down in the bottom window. And then we're also going to need the Animator as well. So Animator, come here, and there you go. That's already appeared up there at the top for us. Brilliant. So we can now hop between these two. If yours came up in a window, then just grab it and dock it up here in the middle window. Now the animator is how we're going to be controlling how the animations work once we've made them. Obviously at the moment we haven't got any, so we can largely ignore the animator, come back to scene where we can see our character. And what we're going to do instead is we're going to highlight the player, then we're going to come down to the animation window and click create to make our first animation. When you do that, it's going to ask where you want to be saving things, and we haven't got a folder in here. So what we'll do is we're going to create a folder. We're going to go to New, make a folder in our assets, as we can see, and we're just going to call that Animations. Go. From there then, we're going to call this first animation that we're going to be creating Idle Front. So this is going to be the idle animation when the character is facing towards us, so we'll be able to see his front and side. There we go. Into our animations folder you go. Save you in there. Now if we go back to project, we'll be able to see there's our animations that we've created, and here is the idle front animation that we are making, and it's already attaching it onto the player. Fantastic. Now let's just go back to our animation, and we can see here we are. So in the animation screen, we've got a mixture of different areas we can work with. This is our timeline, so this is where we're going to be setting which frames we're going to be working with. And on the other side, we're going to be setting more of the information around how fast it's going to be running, and we can also decide on more animations if we want to. For now though, we can see down at the bottom left where it's saying idle front. That is the animation we're working on. From here then, what we need to do is we need to get our sprites and we need to bring them into the timeline so that they can work as part of the animation. And that's a little bit difficult at the moment because they're buried away in project over here. What we're going to do then is we're going to move our project window just for now. We're going to grab hold of it and we'll drag it over to next to tile palette up at the top. And what this means is that you can access everything that's in your project, all of your assets, all of your scenes, all of your script, everything as normal. We're just doing it from over here instead. And what this is going to allow us to do is have a look at our assets, come down to where our Fox idle assets are, or the bear if you're working with that character instead, or whichever of the tile sets you're working with if you're working on your own project. Or we can open that up and we can see, right, so here are all of the sprites that we cut out last time. And I want front, so I want him to be facing towards me. So what I can do is I can highlight that from here, press Shift, press the next asset along as well, so we've got both of these sprites highlighted, and then drag them both and drop them into the timeline. And they will appear there for us, so that now when we hit play, our Fox is actually doing his idle animation, but he's doing it phenomenally quickly at this point, so fast we can't really see what's going on. So what we'll do is we'll stop that, and we'll come to where it says samples. So this is deciding basically how fast each of the frames is going past. Instead of it being at 60, we're going to set it to 2, which is far more reasonable at this point. So now when we hit play, our Fox is just gently breathing up in the top corner, rather than sort of breathing so fast we can't even see him, he's just a blur sort of thing. So that is a far more reasonable. If we think that looks a little bit fast, does he look like he's huffing and puffing? Maybe a little bit. Instead then, maybe we'll set the sample rate to 1. And here you can play with it if you're making your own project or whatever. Just decide on which of the animation speeds looks best for you. How does one look? Yeah, that looks better. He looks like he's more calmly breathing rather than like he's been running or something. Great. Next then, what we can do is we can have a look at our idle front, and if we hit the drop down button next to that, you can see we have create new clip. That will bring up a new animation that we can now create, so this is going to be idle back. And we can then just save that into the same animations folder, and we'll create the idle back animation in the same way that we just did front. So here's our fox facing forwards, and here he is facing backwards. So now we'll just grab both of these sprites, drag and drop them in, and we'll set it to the same sample rate as we did before, because we don't want him to be breathing faster when he's facing forwards than he is when he's facing backwards. So now, when we play that, there he is. He's now facing back and still breathing at a nice even tempo. Then next we just need to set up our remaining two animations. Again, coming back down to the drop down next to where it says idle back, and we can see where each of the animations we are created are being saved. So we've still got idle back there and idle front, and we're just going to create a new clip. This is going to be idle left. We can then save that one, and then coming over to our sprites on the right hand side, we can see the ones where he's facing in a left direction. Click one, shift, grab the next one, and then we will drag and drop those into our timeline down at the bottom, and again set our sample rate to be 1. Then just repeat again. We've got idle left, let's create a new clip. We're going to need idle right. Save that into our animations, and then come and get the last of our couple of sprites where he is idling and facing to the right. And again, setting our sample rate to be 1. So now what we can do is when we play that, we can see he's facing in a right direction, and we can cycle through our different animations just by selecting them to see what it is that we've got, and then it'll show you exactly what is animating in your scene window. Brilliant! So next then we just need to do exactly the same procedure to set up our walking animations instead. So we can get rid of the idles and we can bring up the walking sprites. Here they are all down the bottom. You can change the width of these windows if you find that it's being a little bit awkward, or if it's trying to put them in singles like it was just then that you saw. And one thing that you'll notice here is that our walking animations, they have got 4 sprites each. They're not just 1. What we'll do is we'll set up walking left together, and then we'll be able to do all of them. So if we come down to our animations, we're going to be creating a new one, and we're just going to create walk left. Save that into the same folder. And now what we're going to do is going to say, okay, right, we need to have all of these sprites. What you need to make sure that you're doing is selecting them in the right order for how the animation runs. So if I just pick these, 1, 2, 3, and 4, then drag them over and drop them in, we can see that here is where the scrubber is. This is going to run, this is the line that effectively shows you which of the animations is playing, which of the frames. And as that goes through, it runs across, then it goes back to the beginning, and then it runs across. So it plays them all in order. If you've got your sprites out of order, you'll find that the animation just looks really, really weird. So let's just give that a play and see how we're looking. Hey, look at those little legs go. Okay, yeah, maybe not quite that fast. Let's give you... I think one might be a little bit slow, because in this case we've got 4 different frames. Let's try sample rate of 2 and see how that goes. That looks better. It looks like he is walking at a much more sensible pace at this point. Brilliant. Right, so let's just stop him walking along and we'll get the rest of those 3 animations set up. So we just need walk front, walk back, and walk to the right. There we go. So once you're done, you should have all of our animations. We should have 8 of them in total, with us walking and idling in the 4 different directions. From here then, if we go up to our animator instead and we have a look, here we go, they have all been made and put into the animator for us. Those are all of the different animations that we've created. At this point it is a little bit complicated having all of these, so what we're going to do is we're going to scrap them and we're going to use them in something called a blend tree instead. What we can do then is we can use a box, we can highlight all of these and then just hit the delete button. And they've gone. But don't worry, they are still all saved, they're just not currently loaded into the animator. The animations themselves are still there. If you don't trust me, you can always come up to your animations folder in your project folder, and there they are. See, I told you they were still there, and they are. From here then, in our animator, if we right-click the mouse button, we can see we've got some options to create some new states. A state being anything that the animator is effectively using. So it's a bit like stepping stones. So entry is a state, exit is a state, It's just a fancy way of saying something that's in there. Idle front animation. That would be a state. It's something that we can go to and from. What we're going to be creating, though, is we're going to be creating a blend tree. And what this is effectively, it's just a fancy way of saying, I hold lots of different things and we can move between them within me rather than having to have loads and loads of buttons and states inside this animator. This little blend tree is going to hold it all for us. And this particular blend tree is going to be holding our idle animations. So if we come up to the inspector with the blend tree highlighted, let's name it idle. From there then, if we double click on our blend tree and go into it so that we can see what's going on, we can see that we get a little bit more information about it. Click on our blend tree. So at the moment, it's still a tree. That's right. Blend type, one-dimensional. No, we are using a 2D game. We're going to be having 2D directional input, and we want it to be able to go forwards and left to right. So we'll have 2D simple directional input there. Next then, it is looking for parameters. So this is effectively, if this is a blend tree and it is holding lots of different animations, how does it know which animation to play? Well, we know what we want it to do. When I walk to the right and I stop, I want you to play the right animation for idle. If I go to the left and I stop, play the animation for left idling. That way our character isn't suddenly changing direction every time we stop. For that then, we can come over to the parameters over here on the left hand side, and we can say that we want to give it some new parameters, so we can click on the plus. But do we want to give it float, integer, bool, or trigger? Well, if we think about this a little bit more carefully, and we go over to scene, and we have a look at our player, so what we want it to do is detect whether we're moving up, down, left, or right. Well, the game couldn't care less about up, down, left, and right. That means absolutely nothing to it. That's a bit of a human concept, not a game one. All the game cares about is the position of this game object, this player. And we can see that it is logging that over here as position, as the X and the Y coordinates, and it's using numbers, it's using decimal numbers, so it's going to be looking for a float. In this instance then, if we just move this around, we can see, well, if I travel to the what me is the right, as far as the game's concerned, what's happening is the position on the X-axis is slowly going up. Or down on the Y-axis, up on the Y-axis. So this is what we want it to detect. Did I last move the X-axis up? Did I last move the X-axis down? We need to have an X-axis input and we need to have a Y-axis input, and they're both going to be floats. Right, back over to the animator. So for our parameters then, like on our blend tree, we know we're going to be adding in a float, and we're going to adding in another float. The reason why we're going to need two of these is we're going to have one for the X-axis and one for the Y. So if we just double click on our float, we can name this our last X input. So where were we moving on the X-axis? And we can do exactly the same for the one below. We'll just call this our last Y input. So were we moving up or down? And then from here then, if we come back over to our parameters, we'll be able to select these on the drop down, last X input and last Y input. So we'll be able to link those up with scripts to tell it what to do. At this point then, it knows exactly what it is it's looking for, but it doesn't know what to do with them. What it needs is to be told which motions are going to apply to which of the animations that we've given it. At this point the list is empty. We're going to have 8 different motions in here, as our character can move in 8 different directions. Up, down, left, right, and then the diagonals in between them. So we need to add on a motion, add a new motion field, and we're going to add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. That's one motion for each of our different directions. Now, I need to get my hold of my animations once again, so I'm going to grab my project tab and I'm going to drag it back down the bottom so that I can see the different animations that we've got here, as well as the inspector for the blend tree. Because, effectively what's happening here in this little box is this little dot is the player. This is us. And these dots around the outside, these represent the different directions that we can move in. So let's input our first motion to be idle back. If you just drag and drop from the project tab down the bottom and pop it straight into the motion there, you can see there's our animation. Don't worry, it's not like you've deleted or moved anything from down here. These are purely links. But, so we can see here is our idle back. Now I want it to show the idle back animation. As we can see, we're being shown a little display here when our character has moved away from us and stopped. So on the X-axis, I'm not too fussed about that. That can stay at 0 because I don't care if it's moved from side to side. but I want it to be moving in an upwards direction, so I need it to be positive. I need that to be 1. What we'll find now is that our little tab, our little link has shown up at the top one to show, okay, this is linked with this. When it's moved in this direction, that's when we're going to show that animation. Great. So now we can go for idle front. We'll drag that one, drop that one in. Again, X can stay at 0. Not fussed about whether or not we've changed direction in the sides, but we want it to be coming back, so towards us. This is going to be a negative number, so this is going to be -1. Now what we'll find is the next one appears down below, and we need to fill in all of these for our different animations. So if we now get the idle left, well, that's already pointing towards the left. That's fantastic. You can just stay there. And if we go and get idle right, that's going to be the opposite, of course, of idle left. So we don't really care about the Y input. That can become 0. But on the X, we want it to become a positive moving to the right, so that now needs to be 1. And that will appear over there. And at this point, you now need to make a decision. So when your character moves in a diagonal, do you want it to be showing the sideways animation, or do you want it to be showing the away and towards animations, the front and back? Most instances in most games in 2Ds, you tend to find they play far more horizontally than they do vertically, simply because you can't really put things behind them because it'll be hidden by a sprite. So houses, for example, tend to go in lines rather than in columns. So what we can do back in the animator then is we can say that our left diagonals, both of them are going to play the left idles when we stop, and both of the right diagonals, they will both play the right idles when we stop. So we're going to need 2 more idle lefts. We're going to need 1, which is going to go in the top left corner. So it's going to be -1 on the x-axis and 1 on the y-axis. And then we need to have its counterpart down at the bottom. Again, idle left bringing in. And that one instead this time, -1 on our x-axis and -1 on our y-axis. And then we can bring over both of our idle rights. So idle right, this one is going to go in our top right corner. So it's going to need to go 1 on our x and 1 on our y. And then we need to bring in 1 for down in the bottom. And that is, of course, going to be 1 on our x, but -1 on our y. And there we go. We can see that we have spaced out all of our points. And when we click on them, they will highlight and show which one of our animations is playing. So idle back, idle front. That should be idle left, as should this one be. Yep, that's the other idle left. Left, right, right, and right. And that's an easy way that you can just go around and check that everyone's going to be playing the right animations. Okay, so now we've got all of our idle set up. We need to do exactly the same thing for our walk. But we'll go over that one a lot quicker this time. So if we go back to the base layer, we're going to be creating a new blend tree. Click on our blend tree and we're going to name it walk. We can then go back to the walk and then we can double click on that to go into it. And from here, what we can do in the inspector is we're going to set this one to be a simple 2D directional. And we're going to need to give it some new parameters because we don't want it to just have the last X input or Y input. We want for walking to detect what is currently going on, not what the last one was. So we're going to go to a new parameter, add in a float, and we'll call this the current X input. Add in another parameter, another float, and this one is going to be the current Y input. Select these to be our 2 parameters that we are blending for, current X input, current Y input, then add in our 8 motion fields. So 1 and 8. There we go, so there's all of our different ones, and once again we're going to need to link these up with our animations, starting with walk front, walk back, walk left, walk right, and each of the diagonals as well. And I'll just pause here for a second so that you can just quickly have a little comparison, just to make sure that all of your X and Y's, minuses and 1s are all linking up as they should. Remember as well that you can of course just click through each one and make sure that each direction is playing the right animation too. From here then, we next need to go back to the base layer, because at this point we've got our walk blend tree set up, but we have no way of actually getting it. As soon as the game starts, it's going to go straight into idle, which is absolutely fine. That's what we wanted to do to make it look like the player has got a little bit of motion to them. From idle then, we need to get to walk. And to do that, we need to click on our idle, right click on it, and then click to make a transition and just go over to the walk and click on that. And you can see we've got this little bar just here that is representing going from idle to walk. If we have a click on that then, we can see that it's telling us what it's going to do. So it's going to go from idle to walk. Fantastic. And if we just open up the settings, at the moment what it's saying is that as it goes through the idle animation, there'll be an initial moment of blur before we actually go into the walk. Now that's brilliant if you're doing something like a 3D game or you want there to be a brief animation as a character starts to move. In 2D, typically this doesn't happen. Typically what happens is the character just moves immediately, otherwise it feels like it's lagging. So what we're going to do then is we're going to take off the exit time, we're going to take off the fixed duration, and we're going to get rid of this transition duration as well. That is just going to be 0. And so what's going to happen at this point is we'll be in the idle animation, and as soon as we put one of our input keys down, as soon as we click to move our character, it's just instantly going to go into the walk animation without there being a delay. As I say, that can make it feel like your game has got some kind of lag going on. At this point though, we don't really know whether or not we should be doing that because we've not set a condition for it. We haven't said when we want this transition to actually take place. What we're going to do then is we're going to just click on the plus button in order to add in a condition. At the moment it doesn't quite know what we want because it wants us to select a new parameter. Now when we're walking, we wanted the game to just register that we're moving. We don't really need it at this point to register the exact direction that we're going in. That's what the blend trees are for. We just want it to know, are we moving or not? So if we come back up to our parameters up at the top and we add one in, what we need is a bool. That is quite literally just a true or false statement. We can bring that in and we can say, well, is the character walking? That's either going to be a yes or a no. We can see we've got a little tick box just there. So what we can do then, we can back onto our transition, where it says conditioned blend, that's not what we want. We simply want to know walking. Are we walking? True or false? True at the moment, because going from idle to walk, we want that to be true. We've started to walk. What that means though is that we can now have another transition. If we click on our walk, right click, make a transition, and we can go back to our idle. And this is going to of course be when we have stopped walking. Once again then, we still don't want it to have an exit time because we want this to all happen instantaneously. No fixed duration, no transition periods at all, just absolutely 0. We want it to just go instantaneously from walk back to idle again. Again, we don't want that lag. Condition this time though is still going to be walking, but it's going to be a false input rather than true. So we're not walking anymore, we've stopped, which means we need to be idling. And for the animator then, we can now leave this just there. The game will start, we'll go through entry, we'll come into idle, and at all times that the game is playing, we will either be idling or walking. We're not going to be exiting because we always want one of these animations to be playing, otherwise the game is going to look very static. And so the last thing we need to do then is we need to link all of this up to our script so that when we actually put an input in, it makes changes so that the right animation is going to play. For that then, we'll come over to our scripts and we'll go to our player movement script. And the first thing we're going to need is to get access to the animator. So we'll make a variable for the animator and we're just going to call it animator so that we know exactly what it is and what it is that we're talking to. Then, just the same as we did for the rigid body, we need to tell it what it is it's going to be controlling. So if we type in animator and then tell it needs to get the component, which is animator with a capital A off of the same object that the script is attached to, in this case the player, it'll know which animator it needs to be commanding. And then if we come down to where we made our function for moving our player, first thing we're going to need to do is we know that we made a bool so that it can detect whether or not we are actually walking. And so we need to create that in here so that that bool is going to change. We need to tell our animator that that bool that we made called walking, we're going to be setting it to true as soon as the move player input action starts. Then, after we've put in our movement input, so this is the line that is actually going to make our player start to move because we're changing the vector to, after that, we need the animator to change the floats that we called current x input and change that to be aligned with the movement input that we've put into x, so movement input dot x, and the same for the y. In this way then, those two parameters are going to be reading which X and Y's we're going to be doing on the input and changing our animations accordingly. Make sure with this one you have put it after the line with the context read value, because this is the one that's actually going to move the character. So we've told the animator you're going to be changing to a walk, then we're going to start moving the character, then we're going to change the animation. This will all happen so quickly, it's not like there'll be any lag though. Great, but what are we going to do if we then stop walking? At this point, we're automatically just going to assume that this is what we're going to be doing forevermore. As soon as we stop, we need to go back to the idle animation though, which we're not at the moment. So what we need to do is we need to come underneath where we've set the bool to walking, and we're going to need an if statement. So what we can do is we can say if the context is cancelled, so if the input action is no longer being received, we need to set the animator bool of walking back to being false, because we're not walking anymore. And this time what we need to do, because we're going to be transitioning back to our idle blend tree, we need to make sure that the last X input is whatever our last movement input was on X, and the last Y input is whatever our last input was on the Y axis. That way it'll be able to detect which way we need to face when we are idling. Right, okay, back to Unity. So now everything should be in for our little player. Everything should be good. Let's have a play and let's just see what happens within them. So we should go straight into the idling animation. Oh, and we're facing backwards. And yep, we are idling back. Yep, we are idling front. Idling right. Idling left. We can walk to the right. We can walk to the left. We can ski from the... Oh, walking back's not too bad. Walking forwards, that animation is definitely playing too slow. We look like we're sliding. That one's a little bit too slow as well. Let me just tweak these. Okay, so all I've done is I've just come back to the player, I've come back into animation, and I've just changed the sample rate for the walking animations. So walking backwards and forwards is now sample rate of 3, and walking left to right is now sample rate of 4. So we're just walking a little bit faster when we're going backwards and forwards. So now, hopefully, we'll look a little bit more natural. Hey, there we go. He looks more like he is walking and less like he is sliding. Very good. Right, so little character is all set up, and he'll stop and idle nicely, always in the right direction. He's not snapping back and looking in the wrong way. Well done, little Foxy. Very good. Right, so with all of our animations set up, I'm going to call it there for this one. Next time we'll look at getting the camera set up so that we can actually walk around this island properly and have the camera follow us rather than being stuck in one place. But, well, have a good time everybody, enjoy playing with your own games, have a good one, and I'll see you again soon. Bye bye!